There we go. All right, so we're just going to jump right into it. My name is Suai. I am director of Motown Musician Accelerator. I heard about Republica through one of our sponsors, Techtown Detroit. I was very interested, very glad to be here. I submitted a proposal to talk about the history and evolution of Detroit's music and creative scene, and so here we are today doing this. Briefly about the program, we give four independent artists, $20,000 grants, along with 12 weeks of career mentoring to get their careers to the next level. We got 400 applications from Detroit-based artists, and we narrowed that down to 4, and we are now fully in our program. It's a 12-week program. We're just getting through the first 4 weeks of the program, so they were charged with creating something in the create phase. Next phase is connect. We're going to go out to New York for a week, LA for a week, put them in the rooms and the offices of music industry professionals in the hopes of broadening their reach. And then for the final phase of the program, which is called our planning phase, we're just going to sit down with them and map out the next 12 months of their career. So when the program ends, they don't lose their momentum. So that is Motown Musician Accelerator in a nutshell, and that's Suai, that's who I am. I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves very briefly. Just please let us know who you are and why you're here, your organization, and we'll get the flow of it.
Hello. There we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Rossi, and I'm an independent creative consultant and cultural producer here in Detroit. I also work as a studio manager for Tiff Massey, who was on a panel earlier today. I have been organizing and working within the arts in Detroit for 15 years, and my personal ethos is always about providing platforms and uplifting and providing access to resources to primarily women, non-gender identifying people, and people of color within the arts community, and that's both within arts and music. And I've done lots and lots of different things, but specifically related to music. In 2013, I started a collective here in Detroit for female and non-gender identifying people called the Seraphine Collective. Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Bonjour. Ani Gichi Manatu Ishkote Nene Dijna Kaz Ke Jawanang and Donjaba Wawiawatag and Donjaba Mashikin Dodem. And that is the original language here where we sit on this stolen land we call Detroit. My name is Sacramento Knoxx, and I'm an Anishinaabe person, and I'm a musician and filmmaker. And I co-direct the arts organization, the Atazokan.
I love that accent language. My name is Stacey Hale, known as Stacey Hotwaxx Hale, as a DJ. Been entertaining and DJing in Detroit for over 30 years. I teach and do production and mentor young girls and continue to play and bring them up, and young men as well.
Thank you, Stacey. My name is Carleton Gholz. I am executive director of Detroit Sound Conservancy. My experience in the music scene goes back to 1994, working at Harmony House Records and Tapes, if anybody remembers that, and 20 years professional journalist.
Let's pass this one down.
What up, though? There you go. See, it would happen to happen this way. As soon as the white guy passed me the mic, I can't say shit. My name is Pirahnahead. I am a Detroiter. Have been a Detroiter since September '72 at Hutzel Hospital. I'm a musician and a producer and an engineer and a string arranger, and I believe in keeping the history of Detroit's music real, and that's that.
Okay, so let's just jump right into it. I have my notes here. I'm going to try and not like read them verbatim though. But I will be reading them verbatim because this panel is so dense and there's so much history and so much story here. I'm going to try my best to keep us to our time limit. But I just want to kick things off with asking you all, each of you, to chime in on this. At what point did you enter Detroit's music and creative scene? For me, I was 18 years old and I opened up for Brian McKnight at Freedom Hill Amphitheater. Before that, I was just writing songs in my dorm room. And at that point, when I got on that stage, I felt like I had become an artist in Detroit. So I'd love to hear, at what point, when do you remember, when was it that you knew that you had become someone in Detroit, an artist, a creative in Detroit?
Well, my first entry into the creative scene was through music in Detroit, and it was, I grew up in the western suburbs of the city, and it was coming to shows in Detroit, primarily rock shows, but when I was less than 16 years old, because my friends were driving me here, but 14 and 15 years old, coming to Detroit to see bands perform. But it was probably about 15 years ago when I first moved to the city that I began to actively engage as an artist within the community.
You said the entrance, so that means
Yeah, there we go. There you go.
hello? Oh, I thought someone was about to get fired. Just kidding. Let me see. I stopped clocking in, I guess, in 2015, and I started paying my taxes the hard way that year. So that's when I kind of started the professional world of music. I have a jazz background, native indigenous background, and it's always kind of been there. It doesn't leave me alone. But I'll say when I started organizing my money right with the government, I was in 2015 as a professional artist.
I started at age 4 when I was able to entertain my family by singing and playing an instrument, and they paid attention to me, and I've been entertaining ever since.
Do you remember when it went beyond the family?
At age 16, 17, 18, I got my first gig DJing and made $25 for 6 hours. I said, I've made it.
As I said before, I come out of the music business through the retail end and the selling of records and the buying of records in the record stores, and that's really that in radio. I grew up in Troy, the city of tomorrow, today, and for those of you who are new to the area, it's way out in the burbs, and but we were connected through radio, so I could at least listen to Detroit radio and also the CBC. And so I felt a part of something, but I didn't know if it was something that I could participate in. It wasn't until, being on the other side of the counter and, getting my $3 an hour paycheck, and my parents took half, and I still had more money than I'd ever seen. So that's the beginning for me.
For me, it would have to be, I think, 1987, 88, when I was on a record with Dennis White and I think his name was Dave, I couldn't remember. But there was a record called D Brothers in Full Effect on KMS Records in 1988, and I did the guitar lick. And there's a spot in the song where they say, "Yo, Mo, give me some guitar," and I played, and that was my first whatever. Who drove you to the gig? My mama.
Shout out to mamas dropping people off at gigs to play on records. Motown Records just celebrated its 60th anniversary this year. Yeah, we can give it up for that. That's a huge deal. I had a chance to go to the Hitsville Honors the other evening. Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, the Velvelettes, the Four Tops, the Temptations, Berry Gordy. Everyone was there. Everyone was speaking, and it was mind-boggling to me. You know, I wasn't alive, but I definitely saw footage from Motown 25, you know, when Michael put the glove on and he moonwalked. And I talked with my mom about that. I was like, you know, what was that like? The last time she'd seen Michael, he was with his brothers, you know, and it was, they had some, she said, some moderate hits, you know, but then we saw him at Motown 25 and he moonwalked and he had a silver beaded glove on, and it was just, you know, it was something that just was mind-blowing to everyone. And that was 25. And so now we're at 60, and that music is still alive. Someone quoted from that weekend, they said, put on some Motown. You don't say that about any other label. So what is it for you, like what part of Detroit's musical history has impacted you the most? And if you feel like, you know, tooting your own horn, what part of the music and creative scene have you impacted the most? Given, you know, like the Motown 60th being like the foundation of that, of all of that, you know, Motown impacted the world, but how did you impact Detroit, or how did some era of Detroit's music history or creative history impact you? And there's no order, you guys can jump in whenever.
Well, I think in 1985, WJLB had a DJ contest. It was called the Motor City Mix. Called the Motor City Mix, presented by the station in Motown, and I competed against 600 DJs, and I took first place. It changed my life.
And that was what year again?
1985.
So what was going on in that time? Was that competition a big deal? Was it a small, I mean, it was 600 people, so, you know, like
well, we had to submit cassettes to the radio station. And the people that were listening to the cassettes were Lisa Orlando, James Alexander, and Don Was. That's who produced this Motor City Mix. And I actually submitted 2 cassettes. I had another friend of mine, Elton Weathers, that I was begging, submit, and he was being ornery and didn't do it, so I actually submitted 2 cassettes. And both of them made it to the final. It just didn't have my name on that second cassette. And so then they narrowed it down to 20 of us, and we had to actually perform over at Masonic Temple to see that we could, you know, play the music, and then it went down to 10. And so I made it to the finals. And, you know, I thought it was all I didn't believe it, you know, being a woman, and the fact that half of the contestants were rappers, and I couldn't see how I could compete against somebody dancing on stage doing whatever they do. But one particular thing Don Was said to me, he said, "You're no longer a DJ, you're a performer." And I listened, and I took that in mind, you know, to do just that. So I dressed up, I got all dialed up. Doing the music was the easy part, but I made myself an actress, and I came out on stage, and all of New York was our judges and things like that, and that's how I got recognition for
Would you say that time around 85, that the rest of that decade was pivotal for you? Like, was that something that really changed the DJ scene in Detroit? Just having a
I was
contest
starting to change
like
the DJ scene before then, because I was always on the cutting edge and playing everything that you didn't hear on the radio. I've always been like that, always been on the cutting edge, and so much to the point that some of our DJs on the east side would come over to here. It's like, what in the hell are y'all over here doing in Cheeks? Because we would be very progressive. We were dawning on techno. We were playing house. I would go to Chicago, fill up my trunk full of records, and bring in, and we're just constantly breaking and doing new things. I started using samples. I started remixing stuff right live and doing all those things right at Cheeks. All that happened at the same time. And so it made a pivotal difference, and it made a lot of other people say, I want to be a DJ. It's exactly what happened, because it wasn't as many as it is now. And it was done live. It was no digital, nothing.
All vinyl.
No, yeah, all vinyl. All vinyl.
When did you first be Hotwaxx? When was Hotwaxx debut?
Well,
When was the Hotwaxx brand?
Great question. No, Hotwaxx came along after I won that contest, I received a contract to be one of the DJs on the air at WJLB. And at that time, I thought that you had to have a DJ name, because I was just being Stacey Hale, and I was fine with that. And a hairstylist, Darnell Small, I would go get my hair done with him over in space. And he looked at me one day. He said, "You Hotwaxx." I said, "You what?" He said, "You Hotwaxx." I'm like, "What? What is that?" I said, "Okay, Hotwaxx." So when I signed my contract at the station, I told him I'm Stacey Hotwaxx Hale.
And they loved it.
And I couldn't.
And it still sounds good today.
So that happened right around 86, 87, something like that.
Carleton, do you have a moment in Detroit's, like, was there an era that impacted you the most?
Well, so the Sound Conservancy is, we're a historical preservation group. That's really where we come out of. We're a bunch of archivists and nerds, and some people on this panel were very helpful at the very beginnings. And so I've learned, I keep learning about Detroit music, so it doesn't stop. It's like waves. And just when I think I've sort of got a big map of the whole thing, I feel like okay, so I kind of know what this is here or whatever, then another rabbit hole opens and I don't know anything again. And so that happens all the time. I think it happened, with Pirahnahead, with United Sound Systems, and the fact that, yes, Motown started 60 years ago, but they didn't record those at Hitsville. They recorded those at United Sound Systems. And so I think the challenge of memory in the city of Detroit and the challenge of nostalgia, I was there at the groundbreaking. My parents were listening to CKLW in Port Huron, Michigan. Canadian radio was the only way you could get black music in Port Huron in the 1960s. It was the Canadians who were playing it. And, that was the music that, my father used to persuade my mom to make out in the back of a car, I assume. And that's the reason why I'm here. So, yeah, well, I don't think they did, though. Not in Port Huron, I don't think. But I guess my point is that it comes in waves, and I think that, I'm really glad Stacey's talking about performance and entertainment. I think in arts culture, there's some people still around who think that art and entertainment are sort of different things, and that's just insanity. In a place like Detroit with well over 100 years of world-class entertainment, and next year is the 100th anniversary of commercial radio in the United States, which began here. And so I know I'm not answering your question, but.
So, and you picked my brain for how many years?
Well, 15, 16 years, yeah, absolutely. Yep. Yeah, and it's now, and actually we're in a real big process right now with Wayne State University. It now has all of our manuscripts. So they have all my notes, and they have all my interviews, and it'll all be open to the public in next year. So I'll call you about.
So thank you for keeping it documented, because that was real important. And so just because he reached back into the culture of the music and stuff all the way across the board, and he would reach out to me all the time. He would be in other cities, and I'd, okay, and I'd talk, okay, he'd get, but I was glad he was doing it. I wasn't writing it down. So, I've always answered you.
And when is that coming out, or when is that going to be unveiled? You said next year?
We've always had our manuscripts. We've had a housing problem. Detroit Sound Conservancy has always had a housing problem and a space problem, because we thought we would be a digital project, and then the need in the city was so great, we got physical very, very quick. We got stuff, and we didn't have a budget to commensurate with that. So we got heavy early, and then have been playing catch up. And then at United Sound Systems, and I think we could talk more about it. I don't want to stay positive. This is an incredible panel, but the owners of United Sound Systems were hounded out of that studio. They were, I think wrongly drawn out in the newspapers as being indicted by the FBI when it was all bull bananas, and they were, and our office was inside United when that all happened. So I had to leave United in a weekend. We had to move all of our archives, and all had to go into storage. So we've been recovering from that moment for the last 3 or 4 years, and we're finally getting to the point now where, next year, by appointment through Wayne State, we'll be able to make things available. So
That's amazing. I can't wait to look at that. Sacramento and Lauren, I want to ask you that same question that Carleton answered in his own way. Um, being, like our person on the panel that's started in music, but more so in like the creative space now, and for you as well, Sacramento, like, what was that era like? Obviously, we all love Motown music, and you also make, hip hop and indigenous people's music. Like, what was it? Is there something? Was there a time, a period where, it was those records that really like sparked your creativity?
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up listening to Motown. I was absolutely obsessed with Michael Jackson as a kid. So Motown had a huge impact on me from a young age, but it was really throughout my teenage years and getting to know the rock and roll scene in Detroit that really impacted me personally. But it was about 7 years ago that I actually started playing music myself, and I picked up a bass guitar, and 2 weeks later found someone to play with and immediately started a band. And it was through that experience that I became really interested in learning about other women's experiences as musicians. And so I started a blog where I started interviewing other female musicians. And then out of those conversations came a lot of ideas that I felt like I couldn't just hold on to and keep. I had to do something with it. And so I ended up gathering a group of other women, most of whom were engaged in the music scene in some way, shape, or form, and started the collective. So I think that that's really where my impact specifically in the music scene started, was with Seraphine Collective, first as the blog and then second as the collective.
Nice. I looked you up as a creative woman, like making things and organizing and designing things. But now that you say you play bass, I see that totally on you. Bass player, yes. Sacramento.
Oh yeah. Dang, I don't know. I just feel like I'm impacted by the real life circumstances we live, and that's what ultimately shapes the sound. And it's just being influenced by real life, like the grit and the joy and the rage and the good times, all that stuff. That really informs how music is made for me. And yeah, we'll see. I feel like I'm just starting out with this stuff, and I'm with OGs and veterans on the stage. So I feel like been starting right now in the past few years, because it's always lived in the hood. It's always lived in the house and in the streets and stuff like that. I think for me, it's just when I go to places like France or Minneapolis or Texas or Oakland, and it's all because of the music. So I think that's where it's different from me, because I need a passport now. Because when you're in Detroit, you don't drive with the license or the insurance, but that's when it started
Don't
for
say
me.
that out loud.
Yeah, we got the city people here, right? They said they'll fix that. Help me out, I got $2,000. I'm making jokes. Yeah. But I say that's it, like the circumstances, the energy in the land. Because all the minerals on Turtle Island are here. That's a cool fact.
I appreciate that. I'm bookmarking that in my brain, and I want to talk to you about that afterwards. Pirahnahead, we talked recently, and you were saying there was a scene before there was a scene.
Yep.
So don't go there too long. But tell us about, obviously, like you mentioned, like you started off playing guitar. Like, what was it that got you to that point, and then where did it go from there in terms of like an era and a sound having an impact on you?
Well, let's just put it this way. In in any neighborhood around the world, you got friends. You know what I mean? And me and my friends just happened to play music, but we also had a DJ by the name of the Electrifying Mojo. And you know what I mean? Hey man, did you hear what Mojo played last night? Can you play that? Now I'll play this. And then that's how, but we also were exposed to concerts, and so we seen Prince live in concert and things like that. We seen Parliament Funkadelic and all those types of things. We had Soul Train and a show called The Scene. Those who remember that, Nat Morris. So, a lot of times what we experienced and what I experienced and what I came away with was all of that music that we had at that time, in some neighborhoods I grew up on the east side, so what we had, you know what I mean? And how that impacts me and this city now is because I'm never letting that go, I can call it techno and invite everybody into the whole party and make it a whole world hold hands thing. You know, I mean, it's still going to be what it was then because this is still Detroit. Coleman Young's ghost is all up and around here.
How's Maccabewick doing these days?
There's a coffee shop somewhere near there, man. It's getting gentrified. We're going to have to get like a historic designation plaque up there. You want to?
Was that what you want? Say more. Come on.
Well, come on. Now we got to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't want to scare you and say don't go too deep. Like, go a little deep, but I really was kind of thinking, like, were there artists in particular, like, who was it that made Pirahnahead excited about, obviously Mojo, playing those records, but tell us about some of those songs, like, can you play that, like, what was being played, like, walk us through a little bit of that.
Being able to play the guitar lick in Sexuality and not miss a lick. Nothing. You know what I mean? Like you literally are playing that tick 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 tick. I mean, and and your friend is playing on the center. You know what I mean? And we're learning that type of thing, but we're learning how that coincides with a sex machine. You know what I mean? And we're writing our own songs and playing, using cassette decks in order to make tracks with. So, you know what I mean? All of those types of things are what shaped what we do now. It wasn't just some magical George Clinton and Prince and them in an elevator with Kraftwerk. It just wasn't that. It was something else that we created out of the need to be able to stay off the streets and not get caught up in the idea of having all of these wads of money from young boys, because they was going to get you. Now that's deep enough.
Right, that we could go there. But, what you said, you made me think about something. I was talking to somebody totally unrelated to the panel the other day, and they were talking about a new artist who I'm familiar with, and they're very excited to have her get in the studio and work with you. So the lick from Sexuality, like these things that you're saying that Mojo was playing, that you and your boys and your friends were emulating so many years ago, like obviously did something, made you so awesome in your craft that 20-year-old artists right now are still, excited to get in the studio with you. So I think that says a lot about your artistry. Stacey, you look like you had something to say.
Yeah, just to elaborate on Mojo, his impact on the city, to us, who we are now, and he still does it right now. He calls me every other month or so to make sure that I'm doing certain things. But there's one particular thing that he did for me. We all know Mojo, but we never knew who he was. Remember, he was a secret, but we all knew the voice, and we all turned off our porch light when he said to do it. He said, turn it off. We all caught the mothership. This was all, visual, and so we never knew how he looked or anything. So one day, I was playing at Lafayette Orleans, crates of records, and this man came and carried my crates in for me. Of course, I'm like, yes, thank you, help. And I played the whole night, and at the end of the night, he turned around and told me he was Clarence Mojo, and I flat out passed out. He knew not to tell me before the fact because I wouldn't have been myself, and I wouldn't have. But that just speaks on the type of man that he is and the impact that he did with music. And he was the first one to put techno on. I mean, the list is long as to who. He changed our minds, changed our rhythms. I would make remixes for him, give them to him to play on the radio, and it allowed us to expand our imaginations, and we did, and we still do.
I'm gonna add one thing to that, what she said. One of the last concerts Prince concerts that I went to see. He was at the Palace of Auburn Hills, out in Auburn Hills, and he said, he was talking about the radio industry now, Clear Channel, and how, Radio One and all these other stations are basically trying to wipe away independent artists and the artistry and the music. They've wiped it. They've already done it. But back then in 2004 or whatever, he was talking about how they were planning to do this. But then he brought up how his career wouldn't be what it is if it were not for the electrifying Mojo. So he basically credited Mojo with the career of Prince. Now, let's chew on that for a minute.
Because Mojo had the room to do that, to play those kind of records, and to play them not just once a week, but to play it a lot. Yeah. No, that's fine. I had a next question, but if you guys want to unpack that a little, excuse me, if you all want to unpack that a little bit more, we are in this space now, you know, where radio, especially in Detroit, has changed. You know, I look to WDET 101.9 as, you know, kind of this last rope that I'm able to utilize. If I have a release, or if an artist that I'm working with has a release, I can call Nick Austin, I can call anybody really. I can call Amanda LeClaire, I can call Ryan Hooper and Chris Campbell, and I can say, hey, can we get an interview? You know, can we get on? If you have something that you want to share, you know, how radio impacted your career in Detroit, how radio shaped Detroit music. I know you each could speak on that, but I think that's important to bring into the conversation, especially since that, you know, we just don't Clear Channel and Radio 1, like Prince was talking about in 2004, predicting that would happen. It's happened, like you said, Stacey. So,
Boot broadcasting.
what could you say about the good old days of radio, though, when you did have that direct link and you could go right to them?
Can I say something real quick? Just real quick. Just the 90s, 95, 96 becomes really important because the 1996 Telecommunications Act, I mean, Bill Clinton is the reason why we got the Telecommunications Act, which allowed for corporations to own more radio stations, right? And exactly, and so that is the instigator for that moment. In newspapers, there was a strike in 1995 at the newspaper strike. And, you know, before 1995, at the major newspapers, you know, you could be a critic, right? An arts critic, a music critic, and that was a middle-class job. That was a union middle-class job. And they never rehired a lot of that stuff, right? We have a handful of people now, and those are the only spouts through the daily papers, you know? So, you know, I think there's real questions, you know, moving forward. Obviously, we're in a tumult politically here, but if we try to stay bullish and positive here, you know, what are our demands, you know, if and when the train can get back on the tracks, you know, what are demands to, you know, the Federal Communications, you know, the FCC, how do we get back to something that approaches democracy, and what do we have to do to do it?
If you could speak before, well, I mean, I know your role is preservation and conservation of our music, so that Detroiters just have this, so that we don't lose it. Could you speak to any time before, you know, like things got off of the tracks where, like you said, in just the spirit of keeping it positive, but like, can you speak to, you know, what your experience was with turning on the radio in Detroit and what you heard when you used to be able to hear things that were new and different?
Well, for the suburban kids, I mean, I can only speak for myself, but, you know, I was just looking at my Twitter feed, and Mike Servito was in, you know, Norway tonight or something like that. You know, he's around the world. And, you know, Mike and I grew up in Troy. We worked at the same record store. And it was late night radio and being able to listen. And, you know, radio doesn't play by political boundaries, you know. And so does mass culture, right? So, you know, daily paper, you know, goes everywhere. It's, you know, was fairly cheap, you know. And magazines could be anywhere. You could be in the dentist office and get a magazine and see something on the cover, right? So, I mean, that's the beauty of American mass, and I can't believe I'm saying this phrase, but the beauty of American mass culture, right, is that, you know, it's pervasive, it's around, and it circulates, right? And so you can be from somewhere, right, but you can, if your ears and your eyes are open enough, right, you can go other places, right? And Detroit is, you know, it's not like we've lost the golden era. I think people, they're incredible artists and musicians making, but it's tougher to make a living. You know, in the early, you know, we're at a UAW strike right now. You know, the last major UAW strike was 1970. That was this long. Back in 1970, being a musician was a union job. You know, period. Everyone was in the union. It wasn't the DJs were. You know. Yeah, I know, and there was that moment where the union should have opened its arms up to synth players and DJs and all that stuff, and it didn't do that. But it's just harder to make a living, right? I mean, I really appreciate Knoxx talking about getting the time when you got your money right is the signal for certain kinds of professionalization, and. Being a critic was a middle-class job in this city, and that makes radio was a middle-class job in this city. So I think we have to fight for workers, but we also have to fight for arts and cultural workers.
I'm keeping an eye on the clock. There's so much I want to ask you all about. Did you want to say something, Pirahnahead, or I was gonna go ahead?
Radio for us, what makes us, and the musicians who are what some call the OGs. I'm trying not to be old yet, but we still had. We were listening to WJZZ as well as we were listening to WJLB, and CKLW is what we grew up on. So it was, you were getting, huh? Oh God, yeah. You know what I mean? You were getting all this conglomeration of the whole pot. You know what I mean? They were playing Bachman Turner Overdrive as well as they was playing the Jackson 5. Mm-hmm. So, you know what I mean? We were getting it all, and that is what created what we have now. Yeah. But when you don't let people have that, the ins and outs of the whole of music, then they can only do one thing. That means they can only go to a Facebook or an Instagram, and you can control them. Yeah. So if you can control them, you can tell them how to vote. Mm-hmm. You can tell them when to go and like this.
Or where to spend their money.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And therefore, anything that you tell them to do, they'll do. So, again, Fela, Zombie.
We could go so much further on that. We could have almost made it just about radio. All right, I'm going to move on to the next thing. So bringing it current, bringing it to now, how do you feel about this new crop, this new generation of Detroit artists? Through Motown Musician Accelerator, I work with independent artists who maybe have like 1,000 followers on Instagram. So they're not yet to that very influential place. They're still very much so a local Detroit independent artist. So do you feel that who we have now, the names that the presence that you're seeing from the new artists in Detroit, do you feel like the theme of this, what we're doing here is access? Do you feel like they have adequate access to you as the veterans who have paved the way and who have done the things that they're trying to do? And do you feel like they're adequately accessing everything that is here for them in Detroit as far as this rich cultural and musical history? One of the conversations I first had with my program sponsors was, do young people still care about Motown? And so I couldn't answer. I do, but I'm 33, so I'm kind of like in this weird generation that's like not 20, but also not 45 and up. So I care, but most people that I don't know if they do. But on the top of access, do you think that artists who are out now doing music now, can they get to you? Can they use you? Do you think that they're using Detroit in the best way that they can? I'm going to start here down with Lauren.
Wow, that's an excellent question. I mean, I think that there are really amazing resources that are available in Detroit for younger artists. I mean, specifically learning about the Motown Music Accelerator. I was really excited about that program. I think it's fantastic, and I'm so glad that you're doing the work that you're doing. There's another youngish organization that started in Detroit a couple years ago called Decypher, and they're a nonprofit, yes. And their mission is to support independent musicians in Detroit and through performance opportunities, but also professional development for musicians. And their goal is basically to boost the music economy in Detroit so that musicians who are based in Detroit don't have to move somewhere else in order to make a living, but can make a living here. So I do think that there are resources that are available. Seraphine Collective is another one. They're still, I'm no longer involved in the collective, but they still have a program for training DJs, training people how to DJ. So I do think that there are resources that are available. I'm a little bit disconnected from the music scene because I've been focusing more on working with all different types of artists and visual artists specifically. So in terms of like the younger artists, whether or not they're accessing those things, I don't know. But I believe so. I'd like to believe so.
What was the question?
There's also people like Knoxx.
Right? Yeah, kids these days, these artists.
Where's my young people? Y'all in here? Make some noise. They right there. I brought them with me. Yeah, I brought them. I mean, that's the resource. I'm trying to be a resource, you know. So brought 3 people with me, young people, training them to be musicians and to learn all the aspects of it, the science and the art of it, the concept. Because I practice every day, almost every day, and they come to the crib and give them tools. I say, like, I got a show over here, can y'all roll? Like, yeah, and then they just come with me on the road, and then it's been organically shaping into a fellowship. We have a fellowship that a couple of the members from the fellowship are here today. But it's all paid for out of our pocket, so you know what I'm saying? It's like this fellowship is new, and it's just going the extra mile, because someone went the extra mile for me to not die here, so you know what I mean? I'm just putting it back in the hat, so.
Yeah, I've truly been blessed. I didn't see some of the blessings coming. I was hired to be the DJ instructor for Girls Rock Detroit, and was at its beginning stages. I didn't know. I just jumped right in and was happy to be able to teach. Hey, kitty. And I had 2 or 3 students I can't recall, and I taught them, and I had 5 days to get them together, and had never touched anything, and had to put them on in concert at the end of the week, as the rest of the groups of the girls do, but they were in a band and playing music. But inside of that, we taught them to care about themselves, give them self-esteem, play music that means something, different things like that. And here we're 5 years later, and not only have they risen and they play Motown music because we asked them to do that as well. That's part of, you know, putting that back in. Don't forget your history. And you can go on my Facebook and scroll down and find a video of the last performance. These girls I just cried the whole time they performed.
In
because
5 days.
In 5 days, I had to teach them. And so that's the challenge to me, to make them be great in 5 days. And I mean, well, really 4. The 5th day is, well, no, it's 5. 6 days is showtime. Doing that, teach at DSA, and so you know, in my mind, every teenager is all hip-hoppity, and that's all they want to hear. And they're playing or listening to licks from Motown samples, but they don't know that's what it is. And so I make it my business to let them know what that is. You know, I even have some 40-year-olds break out and tell me, I think we were playing a George Clinton song, and they thought it was, Can You Get to That? So you know that lick on that? And Linda Carter screamed out, she said, Outcast! I went, okay, I can't, say, sample that. But, back to, again, passing it forward and teaching them, and I'm doing my job, and I have people join in with me to keep our culture of what music is enriched is here from Detroit, to make sure they know it. And when they come in and being hip-hop and not knowing anything else, I make them learn something different than that. And my director of Spin Inc. is the absolute best, and even made me more aware of listening to what lyrics are saying in songs to redirect some of our students and kids and make them pay attention. And I told you, it'd take me a long time to tell all my stories, but, that's great. But the satisfaction in doing that and reaching these young kids, making the sound of Detroit stay true to the game, all the way to, I go to other cities and they have this thing called Motown Monday. And it just floored me that it doesn't happen here in Detroit. How can Motown be celebrated so tough in other cities around the world? I'm sure you've all seen them.
I know of one in LA. There's
Oh
like
my
a dance
God! I
party
went in
every
there and
Monday
it just
night.
floored
Yeah.
me. So I've been on a mission to do it for 5 years, trying to, clubs to have this Motown. And so I just now Motown Monday, where they do it, and what they do is not just playing Motown music, but all the writers, the bands, everything that fed into that. Because we know it's more than just the singers. There's way more than just the singers. So 5 years I've been trying to do this, and I just succeeded yesterday.
We have to talk about it, yeah,
At the Willis Bar, where it's called The Family Tree on Tuesdays, and that is the theme of it.
All right.
And the music, which we'll be bringing in musicians. And
When
all
does that start?
October 22nd.
All right, October 22nd. We're all there, right? Willis Show Bar.
So it'll be me and Sean Drake, all that, and so, yeah, I told you I can go on.
I know. Before we go on, we do want to open up the floor for Q&A. So in literally, and I'm so sorry to rush you, but in like less than a minute, Carleton and Pirahnahead, your take on access, today's youth, how they have access to you, what you're doing with them, so that we can get the audience in there to get some questions.
Well, two quick things. DSC has a scholarship that we've had for the last 3 years in the name of Dan Seco, who wrote Techno Rebels, and we've been giving a little bit of money to future media makers and writers in the communication department at Wayne State University. And then, of course, internally, we train archivists. Our manuscripts are at the Wayne State University School of Library of Information Science. We train archivists here in Detroit. We have a very rich archival ecosystem, and we actually train these people. So I was at a conference this morning with a young person who, did an internship with us, presented about it, and now has a job at the Henry Ford Archives. So that's the kind of world we work in. And then we just purchased the Bluebird Inn on Detroit's west side, and we've got rehabilitation plans for that. But, we're kitty corner to Sampson Weber Middle School, which is still open, and Northwestern, which is nearby. So, long term, we're going to be working with those students. I mean, we've got to, but what that looks like is to be decided.
Anybody who wants to reach me at any time, no matter what age, but especially the youth, I'm right here for them. Because people like Paul Reiser is the reason for why I exist. You know what I mean? I learned from those people who were before me. Jim Vitti on the engineering side, Greg Riley on the engineering side, Paul Reiser, McKinley Jackson, Paul Hill, George, Bernie Worrell, God rest him. Harold McKinney, God rest him, you know what I mean? All of those cats. So, you know what I mean? I'm here to take what I learned from those guys, and Johnny Allen, all those guys, and pass it on to the next generation so that, they're not just going to be laptop cats, you know what I mean? They can actually write down what they, just being real about it.
We did the Johnny Allen vertical file subject folder yesterday. And it's all, it's all connected, man. It's all united to Bluebird. It's all connected.
Well, thank you all for everything that you had to contribute to this panel. We don't have enough time. This was a far reach to try and talk about this topic in an hour.
I want to talk about Jessica.
I'm sorry.
Jessica Care-Moore is coming to the next Black Women Rock.
What do you mean? Like, what are you saying?
She's going to be in the next thing going on here.
The next session?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But just her influence going into that era and what she's done and what she's doing for the kids and what she did for me, and then back to, the whole circle. It just kind of came back. So we reached out to the girls. I'm playing rock music. I'm a rock music musician. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Well, again, and I think that, like you said, Carleton, everything is connected, and we get in our boxes, we get in our isolated little room, we make our things, but I'm so grateful for this opportunity, albeit too short, to be able to sit and talk and share our stories, and hopefully you all gained something from it. We were only able to sprinkle and touch on radio and house and rock and Motown, but I think that it's worth it when you leave this space to be inspired and to ask questions, to reach out to people. And now is that time. If you have, I think we only have a couple minutes for Q&A, but and I don't even know how we'll do it. But if you have a question for the panelists here, I saw one hand go up very slowly right here in third row. Yep.
What's the word? Shout out Knoxx. I'm a member of the Resurgence Fellowship. I got one question, and it's something I've been dealing with since I started. I'm like I don't want to say a tortured artist character, but I really take this so serious that it hurts sometimes. And my question to all of y'all is specifically in my generation, dealing with people just getting into music, there's a consensus that this is easy, and it is, but I feel like there's a passion that's missing from it due to how quickly things could, be on the up and up for you due to it being like a business, you know what I mean? It's capital. And oh yeah, my bad, you can't even hear me. It's a business, but I think one thing that's making it, I think, more difficult for people to sell this music in this generation where people kind of want to feel, what would you say to my generation that would, I guess, help them bring that passion back and spend more time with the music before going into that? Because I personally feel like we're desensitized and there's not a lot of feeling involved, you know what I'm saying? Because, coming from a city like this, it's just, I'm not being serious. We are, and it affects the music. It affects the music. It affects the feeling that the music has and what we're making it for. So what would be your input on that topic?
Number one, look at the world around you and stop being scared to say shit. We had Curtis Mayfield. Every single song he spoke about. Every time I go to the gym every day, the first song I hear is keep on, right? So, use your influence in the world around you. Make use of that. If you see something wrong, brother, speak up about it. Say, if you don't like brothers getting shot down in the middle of the street by the pigs, say something about it. Write it. Use it in a rhyme. Use it as a poem. Paint a picture about it. Be creative. Say something. Because one of the things that I learned from George Clinton back in '77? Think. It ain't illegal yet. Yet.
Can I just say, related to, I don't know about passion. I can't speak to that, but I can say for artists, you've got to own your masters. You have to own your work. You have to own everything. You have to have backups of everything. You need to control what you create. And Universal Music burned a building 10 years ago, and we're just finding out now about it, and we lost everything. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of master tapes. And the only thing that's left is artists that kept their tapes or were able to keep their tapes or had artistic control over their tapes. And a lot of Detroit musicians own their own record labels, and so they have the box with video cassette tapes where they were playing techno tracks or whatever. Like, they have that stuff. And if they had sold, if they had signed certain contracts, that stuff would be burned now. So I just encourage everyone, if you have something, you made it, it's yours, treasure it and don't give it away.
Hello, Sierra Donovan. I wanted to speak to the young man's question about passion. I had an interview today with a newspaper about something I'm running for. And after the interview, the reporter said, "I cannot believe how real and authentic." All of them up here, I know 2 of them. Passion is all about walking in what you came here to do. And we have a lot of people that are doing things and it's not their natural blueprint, their divine blueprint. So don't worry about those, but like Pirahnahead said, when you are doing something from passion, from the place of passion, from your heart, you'll be heard and you will be influential.
Yep.
Do we have time?
We
Are
have
we?
time for one more.
We have time for one more. I'm so glad. Is there anybody else, or we can have our panelists speak more on that topic of passion
Over here. Over here.
over there? Nope.
Over here.
Do we have a microphone for you? I feel like
All right.
there's. Oh, you're on the microphone. I'm like, your
Yeah.
voice is so booming. I'm sorry.
Yeah, my name is Gholz. I'm a part of the Researcher Fellowship, and I just had to piggyback off of what my man's Cassie
And can you
said.
speak up for us, please? Thank you.
No, my name is Gholz. I'm a part of the Researcher Fellowship, and I just wanted to piggyback off something my man's Cass said about the passion. Yeah, it's passion that people losing. You know, some people they don't got passion for it because, like she said over there, I forgot your name. Yeah, Sierra, like you said, some people they just scared to jump out their comfort zone, and like especially when they see the business side of the music, they don't see that as easy as they think. I think that's what people losing, like the focus and the drive to complete the business part. Cause that's what I'm currently, still trying to learn, trying to get comfortable with. So yeah, I just had to say that.
Hey, this is Stephen Boyle, Fuzzy Tech. A number of you up there know me. One thing that I think really matters is the passion coming through. Talk the reality. Talk about the bus situation in our city. Talk about the housing and how the illegal foreclosures have been going on. Talk about the water shutoffs. Talk about the grocery stores that are 1 mile and 2 miles away and you can't quite get to it, especially on the bus. It's kind of hard carrying all those groceries back and forth. How many laundromats there are in the city that are easy for you to get to. Talk about the real issues in your music. And I'll tell you, that music will carry so far. It will carry so far. And we have so much to talk about. And what we got to do is something that Charity Hicks once told us: wage love. You wage love through your music, and you will connect.
Thank you, guys.
I think that's our time.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you,
you
guys.
so much. One time for the panelists, please. Thank you.